14 years, 4 months, and 19 days I've been incarcerated. 10 years, 3 months of them in death row.
It started in 2004 when the Honduran immigrant was accused of killing 2 women.
So it's the case of this guy named Clemente Aguirre. And if I tell you this story, you'll say, you got to be making this shit up. It can't be true.
A man who was sentenced to die, literally was on death row, has had all charges against him dropped.
On June 25th, 2004, in Altamonte, Florida, 24-year-old Clemente was indicted on charges of first-degree murder and burglary, a crime that he did not commit.
From the start, Aguirre Harkin said he found the women dead, that he tried to help, and that's how their blood got on his clothes and his footprint.
It was a gruesome crime that found his neighbors 68-year-old Carol Barais and 47-year-old Cheryl Williams stabbed to death.
I didn't do it. I was killed by.
However, despite Clemente protesting his innocence, police decided he was the only possible suspect, and he was sentenced to death. In the 14 years on death row, Clemente never stopped trying to clear his name. And he wasn't wrong either. As it turns out, Samantha Schell's daughter, prior to the murder, was diagnosed with intermittent explosive disorder.
Within inches of the mother's body and in a bathroom where the state argued the killer cleaned up is the daughter's blood, a trail of the daughter's blood going to the bathroom, and then the mother's blood on the outside of the daughter's window. And there's in the doctor's notes, a few years before this happened, where she says to her mother, "I'm gonna fucking kill you if I ever get out of here. I'll fucking kill all of you." Then we find out that she has confessed all over town. We had people coming in all over the place, testifying, affidavits that she said, "I killed my fucking mother and my grandmother, I'll do it to you."
With such irrefutable evidence implicating Cheryl's daughter, the day finally arrived for Clemente.
I do know that nobody believed me back then. No one. Besides my mother, nobody believed me, and I thank you for it. From the bottom of my heart.
He holds back tears and immediately heads towards friends and family to celebrate.
But today is a brighter day, a new day, and I got good hopes for the future.
This is Debra Milke. She was sentenced to death and spent 22 years on death row for a crime she did not commit in Phoenix, Arizona.
During this whole tragedy, I was angry. Of course I am. I still am. But I can't change anything. All I can do is learn how to live with it.
Milke's 4-year-old son was found dead in a desert, being shot 3 times. Milke was questioned by Detective Armando Soldat Jr., which was not recorded or reported at all. He claimed that Milke admitted to arranging the murder.
She then decided that it'd be best for Christopher Milke to die.
She was then charged with first-degree murder, despite no actual record of her admitting to the crime.
My innocence did not matter in their pursuit of a conviction.
The state determined she had masterminded the shooting, and she was sentenced to death. Over 20 years later, questions started to get asked regarding Milke's confession to Detective Saldate, which Milke still denies ever giving.
I had absolutely nothing to do with the brutal murder of my son, Christopher, and I did not give a confession to Mr. Saldate.
Reportedly, the court found that Detective Saldate had a long list of lying under oath and violating individual rights while interrogating. Milke's alleged confession was the only direct evidence linking her to the crime. And finally, 24 years after the arrest and facing the death sentence, her conviction gets overturned. Listen as she shares her thoughts for the wrongful conviction.
Losing a child to murder is a devastating tragedy. Being falsely accused of a crime you didn't commit is also a devastating tragedy. Try to imagine that. What happened to me could happen to any one of you.
Milke now walks out a free woman.
There's still a lot of people think that you were responsible for the killing of your son. Anything you can say about that?
To people who still think she's guilty, the Ninth Circuit and the Arizona Court of Appeals both reviewed this case thoroughly. And they said that this was egregious prosecutorial and police misconduct that constituted a severe stain on our justice system. And that's the truth of what happened in Debra's case.
What would you like to say to the detective?
I don't know how you can look at yourself in the mirror every day knowing that you falsely arrested somebody, you accused me of something I did not do. You didn't even have the decency to have a witness in the room, to do your job the right way. The only reason you didn't do your job the right way and didn't have a witness in the room is because you walked in that room and you knew what you were going to do to me.
There are no reports of Milke receiving any compensation. This is Eric Kelly, who was sentenced to life in prison for a robbery and murder he did not commit in Passaic County, New Jersey. Kelly was 28 when he was taken into custody after a man was killed working at a video store. Kelly suffered a tragic brain injury, making him suffer a cognitive disability, and he had trouble processing information from detectives and allegedly admitted to the crime, even though he had not done it. Despite no physical evidence, he was convicted and put in prison. It wouldn't be until 24 years later the case was reopened, and major advancements in DNA testing proved that Kelly was not at the crime scene.
Therefore, in light of the foregoing reasons, the motion for a new trial is hereby granted.
A new trial was granted, and Kelly is now outside of prison for the first time in almost a quarter century, still with the fear he might go back.
Mainly, I want to eat. I'm a little hungry. My legal team, I want to thank them. I want to thank my family. Just want to get back to actually living for once.
Surprisingly, the prosecution later dismissed all pending charges against him. Kelly reportedly received $1 million in state compensation. This is Clifford Williams. He was sentenced to death and spent 43 years behind bars for crimes he did not commit in Jacksonville, Florida.
I just wanted to get out and be with my 6 kids. They was gone, and it wasn't nobody but them.
Williams was 34, and his 18-year-old nephew, Nathan Myers, were suspects in a murder and attempted murder. The survivor of the shooting claimed that she had been shot by the uncle and nephew, identifying them both by name. Despite having solid alibis, Williams and Myers were both arrested and charged within hours. No physical or DNA evidence pinned the two men to this crime, yet both men were found guilty. Williams was sentenced to death, and Myers was given a life sentence. It wasn't until 43 years later, while they were in prison, there was a new investigation on the scene, proving that the ballistic reports from the crime lab didn't match the original testimony, and it was the only evidence pinning the men to this crime. And now, this is the moment that Williams and Myers have been waiting for 43 years.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Myers, the indictments have been dismissed against you. You are free to go, and we are adjourned.
After they hear that they are free, they hug each other and their team. Williams and Myers both received $2 million in state compensation. This is Curtis Flowers, who was wrongfully imprisoned for 23 years and set to the death penalty for a quadruple murder he reportedly never committed in Winona, Mississippi. Flowers was 26 years old when he was fired from working at a furniture store. 2 weeks later, the owner of the same store and 3 employees were all found dead inside. In no time, Flowers became a suspect and was later arrested and charged with the murder of all 4 victims. Over 6 different trials, all for the same crime, the final verdict resulted in guilty, and Flowers was sentenced to death. Investigators started looking into the jury selection, and reportedly, the prosecution had racially discriminated during the selection of jurors across all 6 trials. This reached the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was voted to throw the case based on the prosecutor had purposefully dismissed African American from the trial. The judge granted Flowers bail, and he is now getting put on house arrest.
The only times that Mr. Flowers is allowed to be away from the location where he will be residing is if he's receiving medical treatment, attending meetings with his attorney.
And now, in 23 years, this is the first time Flowers is outside of prison.
I don't know. I'm so excited right now.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
A year later, the state denied to put Flowers back on trial and officially dropped all charges. The state of Mississippi announced that it will pay Flowers $500,000 for his 23 years of wrongful imprisonment. This is Robert Springsteen, who spent 9 years in prison and was sentenced to death for crimes he allegedly did not commit in Austin, Texas. Springsteen was 17 at the time, and 3 friends were believed to be prime suspects in the killings of 4 teenage girls at a yogurt shop. One of the boys was caught carrying a .22 caliber gun at the mall, as it was the same weapon used in the killings. The boys were set free after no link was found, but 7 years later, one of the friends was interrogated and begun to give up information, saying that the .22 caliber gun used to belong to Springsteen.
But this is one of the most significant things that ever happened in your life. That's what I keep trying to explain to you. If I was there and I partook in this, I would remember these things. And you do remember these things. No, I don't.
He was arrested, then later convicted and sentenced to death. Springsteen's conviction was later overturned based on an unfair trial. While waiting for a retrial, lawyers requested further DNA evidence to be analyzed from the original crime scene. Even though it had been 17 years, the analysts concluded that no DNA was found of Springsteen and his 3 friends. Now Springsteen is back in court.
Defendant Robert Springsteen's case is being called this afternoon. Additionally, 4 pending capital murder indictments.
And all charges are now dismissed.
The court has signed these dismissals in each of the causes against these 2 defendants, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen.
Springsteen sits silently as he hears that he is now a free man. Springsteen spent 9 years in prison, but his overturned conviction was not granted based on actual innocence, which makes him not eligible for a payout. This is Kimberly Long, who was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison for a murder she never committed in Riverside, California. Long arrived home and discovered her boyfriend dead. She immediately called 911, despite being the person who found the dead body. Long ended up becoming the lead suspect. She was soon convicted of second-degree murder and sent to prison. But 7 years later, forensic evidence showed that her boyfriend died long before she had arrived at the scene, and there was DNA of an unknown male at the crime scene.
The judgment of conviction is vacated and a new trial will be ordered.
Long is now outside of prison. The prosecution soon dropped all existing charges.
I feel happy, elated, relieved, just a lot of emotions right now.
Long reportedly received $386,000 from the California Victim Compensation Fund.